People who have discovered a dead body. What's your story? The bridge and the party. I have kind of an unusual story. I live in New York City, in an apartment that has a balcony looking out over the Queensboro Bridge. About 10 years ago, they opened some new shops and event halls under the stone arches of the bridge. The ceilings down there are beautiful, like something from an old train station. One afternoon, I was out on my balcony enjoying the view when I noticed a man standing right on the edge of the bridge. Before I could even process what I was seeing, he jumped. He hit the ground hard and died instantly. I saw the whole thing happen and grabbed my phone to call the police. Here is the strange part. His body landed directly in front of the main entrance to one of those new event spaces. That very night, a huge party was scheduled there. I believe it was for People magazine. He had jumped only hours before the doors were set to open. Instead of canceling, the staff put up a curtain around his body. From where I was standing above, it was surreal. I could see famous actors and singers walking the red carpet, smiling for cameras, while just a few feet away behind a thin curtain lay a man whose head had been crushed from the fall. It is something I will never forget. A party in full swing, lights flashing, music playing, and death hidden in plain sight just steps away. The garbage bag in the dirt. I did not find it myself, but I knew the man who did. When I was 18 years old, I worked at a clean dirt landfill. My job involved driving bulldozers and excavators. The place sat lower than the surrounding land, so companies would bring in dirt from construction sites, clean soil from houses and buildings, and dump it there. Sometimes people tossed in things they should not have. Once, someone threw a dead dog into a garbage bag, put it in the back of a dump truck, and it ended up at our site. My coworker, Bill, was running another bulldozer that day. As he pushed a pile of dirt, the bag tore open and he saw the dog inside. He was furious, and I could not blame him. A few years later, something much worse happened. Bill was pushing another load of dirt when a garbage bag rolled out of the pile. The blade of the bulldozer sliced into it, and he noticed hair sticking out. Thinking it was another dog, he stopped the machine, climbed down, and opened the bag. I was in the office trailer when Bill came in, pale as a ghost. He just said, "Call the police. There is a body out there." At first no one believed him, but then we saw that his face was white and that he had clearly been sick. I never saw it myself, but I heard what he found. Inside the bag was a young East Indian woman. She had no clothes on, and her legs were tied to her neck while her hands were bound behind her back. The bag was full of other household garbage too. Bill said that when he ripped it open, the back of her head slid out, almost as if she were looking right at him. He could not remember if her eyes were open, but it made him vomit almost instantly. It turned out her killer was her husband, a dump truck driver. Records showed that he had been to our site, and the real proof came from the other trash in the bag. There were beer cans inside with manufacturing codes that matched cans in his refrigerator at home. That was enough to tie him to the crime. I do not know how long he spent in prison, but I know he was convicted of murder. Bill was never the same after that. This all happened sometime in the early 1990s in Delta, British Columbia, Canada. The couple had been living in Surrey, British Columbia. The neighbor and the beach. The first time I came across a dead body, it was my neighbor. I was about 14 or 15 years old, and my parents were out of town. It was around 3 in the morning when the house phone rang. My brother woke me up and told me that our neighbor's son had called. He lived all the way across the country and said he had been trying to reach his mother all day without any luck. He was worried she might have fallen again, something that had happened before, and asked if we could check on her. She was in her 90s, and we had a spare key in case of emergencies. We walked over to her house in the dark and headed to the back door. The moment we got close, a horrible smell hit me. I recognized it right away, but my brother kept trying to convince himself it was just garbage that had been sitting too long. He said maybe she had hurt herself and could not take it out. I do not know why I went inside, except we did not have a phone on us and I figured I would need to call from her landline. As soon as I opened the door, the smell poured out so strong that my brother immediately ran off and vomited on the sidewalk. I still went in. I flipped on the kitchen light and saw her lying about 6 feet from the door. She was bloated, discolored, and hardly looked like a person at all. She was also completely naked. Later, we learned her son had not heard from her in over 3 weeks, and it was the middle of summer. She had suffered a heart attack in the shower and must have collapsed on her way to the kitchen phone. As awful as it was, I was relieved that I found her instead of my brother. I do not think he could have handled seeing her like that. The second time was different. I went to the beach with friends, and a guy I barely knew came along. We were staying in a rented condo. One evening, while some of us were in the living room playing video games, he went into the bathroom and shot himself. Someone called the police, and for some reason I was the one told to go check. I opened the bathroom door just far enough to see blood covering the tile floor, then closed it again. Later, I was told that his parents had found a note among his belongings. He had not wanted to do it at home or anywhere his parents might be the ones to find him. I still do not understand why he chose that moment or that place. The man on the road. This one comes from when I was very young. I grew up out in the country in the south, where the roads twist through hills and you can drive for hours without seeing another vehicle. I was about 5 years old, riding home from school with my mother and my older sister. Out there, when you drive, you often end up in the middle of the road without thinking much about it because there is hardly any traffic. My mother was doing just that when we rounded a bend. All of a sudden, my sister started chanting, "Mommy, there is a dead man in the road. There is a dead man in the road." My mother brushed it off, telling her it was probably just somebody resting in their yard. But my sister kept pointing toward the rearview mirror, her voice rising as she insisted, "Look!" My mother glanced up and saw him, a crumpled figure lying right on the edge of the pavement. If she had not taken the corner unusually wide, she might have run right over him. From what I remember, the man must have taken the turn too sharply, gone into the ditch and been thrown through his windshield. It looked like he had tried to crawl back toward the road for help, but with so little traffic out there, no one had passed by for at least an hour. I do not recall whether he was already gone when we found him or if he passed away a little later, but by the time the emergency medical team arrived, he was dead. My mother told my sister and me to stay in the car and would not let us near him. I suppose that was the right thing to do, but at 5 years old, I was more frustrated than scared. I never found out exactly what happened after that. The man in the brush. I grew up in a rough part of Michigan known as Shacktown. It was basically a poor, rundown neighborhood, the kind of place people might call a redneck ghetto. Almost everyone there was white except for 2 black families, a family from France, and the mail carrier. Near our neighborhood was a place everyone called Fag Park. To this day, I have no idea why it was given that name. I never saw anything that fit it. What I did see were plenty of people smoking crack and having sex in the woods, but it was always heterosexual couples. One afternoon in the 1990s, my cousin and I were walking along a trail by the Rouge River. The river was filthy, full of chemicals, and it smelled so bad that you could catch the odor almost anywhere in the neighborhood. We were just goofing off the way kids do, and after a while we decided to head home and play video games. As we were walking back, an ambulance pulled up. There were no police, just the ambulance. The passenger leaned out and asked if we had a knife. We told them no, and they simply said, "Okay," and grabbed a stretcher from the back. They walked down the same trail we had just come from, and less than 30 feet in, they pulled a man's body out from some brush. That meant we had walked past him twice without even noticing. When they came back out, I was nervous, so I pulled out my tiny pocket knife, smaller than my thumb, and apologized for not telling them earlier. The driver shook his head and said, "That did not do this," then pulled back the sheet. Underneath was a man with deep stab wounds to his neck and face. The smell was awful, but with the river's constant stench, it made sense that we had not noticed it before. The worst part was that we knew him. He was a homeless man who lived in a thick patch of bushes across the park. We had hung out with him many times. He would give us cigarettes and we would bring him food. He had even dragged a couch down there and made a sort of bush apartment for himself. Losing him hit me harder than I ever expected. I have lost my grandparents, my parents, and nearly all my aunts and uncles, but I still grieved his death almost as much as my closest family. The skull in the ravine. This one happened to my kids, not to me directly, but it was a big moment in our lives. It was December of 2010, just before Christmas, on a cold and rainy day. My two oldest children, Ash, who was 12, and Zach, who was 14, were out exploring with their friend Jay, who was 15. Just across the road from our house was a deep ravine, and they had decided to climb down into it. The bottom was muddy and wet, with a thick layer of muck. People had tossed trash and old toys from the road above, and the debris had rolled down the steep hillside to settle there. For 3 kids looking for adventure, it was like a strange little treasure hunt. After a while, the boys grew tired of being wet and cold, so they decided to climb back up the embankment. Ash was trailing behind. She was never a fan of getting her shoes in the mud. She chose a different route, balancing her way across a fallen tree trunk. Near the end, she slipped on the moss-covered bark and landed hard on the ground. When she pushed herself up, she found herself staring straight into an empty eye socket. She screamed for her brother, saying she had found a dead body. At first, the boys thought she was joking, but when Zach glanced back, he saw what she meant. A human skull, half buried in mud, with moss growing over it. Jay pulled out his phone and took a photo to show me when they got home. Without that picture, I am not sure I would have believed them. But once I saw it, I had no doubts. The police were called, and the kids ended up being interviewed by a few local news stations, their brief moment in the spotlight. The investigation uncovered 16 bones. When testing was complete, the remains were identified as a woman who had been missing for 27 years, a victim of the Green River Killer. Her family finally had the chance to lay her to rest. The kids handled it better than you might expect. They were proud to know that they had helped bring closure to a family after so many years. Even now, it is a story they tell when conversations drift to strange or unexpected discoveries. Darren. It was Saturday, June 7th, 2014. My son Darren was 14 years old. He had bipolar disorder, but with medication he had been fairly stable. The day before, he had spent all afternoon and evening with his girlfriend while I was at work. That night, I fell asleep around 11:30. Darren was still awake, playing his PlayStation 4. I told him he needed to be in bed by 3 in the morning at the latest. Lack of sleep can be dangerous for teens with bipolar disorder. When I woke the next morning around 11, I noticed he was still asleep. I thought, good. Maybe he is finally catching up on his rest. A few hours later, around 2 in the afternoon, I went into his room to give him his medication. He was lying on the floor, about 4 feet from his bed, wearing only his boxer shorts. His skin was cold. I started screaming, "No, no, no! He is dead!" I ran to the living room where my daughter and my father were and shouted again, "He is dead!" I grabbed the phone and called 911. The dispatcher told me to begin CPR. I rushed into the bedroom to wake my husband and yelled, "Darren is dead!" We all crowded into Darren's room. I was crying and holding him while my husband stayed on the line with the operator. I kept saying, "Do not touch him," but they urged me to move so CPR could be started, because that was what the dispatcher was instructing. As they tried, bloody foam began coming from his mouth. There were no cuts, no bruises, nothing on the outside to explain why my boy was gone. I ran to check his medication in the drop safe. It was all still there, or so I thought. The autopsy later showed he had overdosed on Wellbutrin and Tegretol. He had been hoarding his pills over time. That night, after I went to bed, he and his girlfriend had argued. He took all the pills at once. The overdose caused a seizure, which led to a fall that caused bleeding in his brain. From there, his heart and lungs gave out. At least he was unconscious by the time his body began to fail. But all of it, the argument, the overdose, was for attention from a girl. That is the day I found my son's body. Rest in peace, Darren. October 22nd, 1999 to June 7th, 2014. Mommy misses you every single day. I used to work at a big theme park years back. One afternoon, I was heading back from my lunch break when a little girl, maybe 6 years old, came up to me. She asked if I could help her find her mom. She said her grandma was supposed to be watching her, but had fallen asleep and wouldn't wake up. She said it in that straightforward, no-fuss way kids do. This was before everyone had a cell phone, Only the rich folks carried them, so I told her we should go see her grandma first. She led me around a bend to a quieter seating area. There was an older woman sitting on a bench, hunched over. My stomach dropped. I went up to her, tried talking to her, then raised my voice. Nothing. She wasn't breathing. I took off running to the nearest ride, told the workers to call first aid, and grabbed a CPR kit. I ran back, shook her a bit, and suddenly she started bleeding from her nose, mouth, every opening on her face. Just then, first aid showed up. My friend Melissa, who was first on the scene, took one look and muttered, "Oh hell!" She called for oxygen, then radioed in the code for someone not breathing and likely dead. The dispatcher asked her to confirm, and she just said, "Yeah, no question." That's when I realized, oh God, the little girl was still there. I had completely forgotten about her in the chaos. She walked right up to Melissa, tugged on her sleeve, and in the smallest voice said, "Will you please help my Nana?" Melissa had to start CPR, and because of park policy, she couldn't stop until the ambulance got there. So there she was, working on this woman's lifeless body as blood kept coming out, while the granddaughter stood there sobbing and begging for someone to save her. That day was rough for everyone. The park gave everyone involved at least a week of paid time off to recover. I never found out what happened to the little girl afterward, but I can't imagine she didn't end up needing therapy. From what the paramedics guessed, the woman probably had a big brain aneurysm that suddenly burst. I've never seen anything like it before or since. Grandma and the crash. The first time I found a dead body, it was my grandmother. After my grandfather passed away, my mother and I moved in with her. Later on, my mom met her now husband and moved out of town, so it was just my grandmother and me living in the house. One morning, I was running late for work. I quickly glanced into her room and saw her lying in bed. I didn't think much of it and headed to work. After work, I went to my boyfriend's house and stayed there until late. When I pulled into the driveway, I immediately felt something was wrong. My grandmother always made sure the porch light was on for me, but that night it was dark. When I walked inside, her dog did not come to greet me, which was unusual. I stood in the hallway for what felt like an hour, calling out to her, afraid to check on her. Finally, I got the courage to look in her bedroom. There she was, still in the same spot. Her dog had crawled into bed with her and even growled at me, something he never did. I called my older brother, who lived about 15 minutes away. He told me to make sure and then call the police. He was already on his way. I touched my grandmother's arm and found it ice cold. I covered her so my brother wouldn't have to see her that way. I coaxed the dog into another room and called the police and my mom. Later, I found out my mom had been in town earlier that day and had stopped by but assumed Grandma was just sleeping and didn't want to disturb her. We both felt terrible about that. The autopsy showed she had suffered a heart attack, so there wasn't much we could have done, but it broke my heart knowing she was alone all day. I carried the weight of that day for about a year. Sent me into a rough place, but I have come a long way since then. I'm happier now than I've ever been. I know Grandma would be proud. The second time was while I was working at a gas station as a cashier. We heard a loud crash outside and saw through the window that a small car had collided head-on with a truck. The small car immediately caught fire. One of our customers shouted for a fire extinguisher, and I ran out to hand him the biggest one we had, one of those industrial-sized cans. I clearly remember seeing the driver reaching out, begging for help as flames surrounded her. The passenger was either unconscious or already dead. We emptied the extinguisher, but it didn't stop the fire. Help arrived too late, and sadly, neither of the young women survived. They were both about 20 years old. It was later found out the driver had been texting and lost control of the car, crossing into the other lane while going about 50 miles per hour. The people in the truck were okay. So here's a lesson for you: do not text and drive. A day in the life of addiction. I was 22 when I found myself using heroin every day, surrounded by nothing but other users. My usual routine was to head over to a woman's house. She was a sex worker and my partner in shoplifting. We would score our first fix there, then spend the day stealing video games and selling them to stores like GameStop. Usually, we managed to get 2 more hits after that, hoping the last one would carry me through the night. One night, after a decent day and with some extra cash, I took my friend back to the sex worker's place where he often stayed. When we got there, she didn't answer the door. At first, we thought she might be hiding from the man who paid for her apartment, some kind of sugar daddy or a client. We waited outside for about 30 minutes, but she still didn't answer her phone, even though we could hear it ringing inside. She lived upstairs in a split-level house. After a while, we decided to try getting in. We got a ladder from a friend a few blocks away, and my friend climbed up first. He didn't stay up there long before looking down and telling me to come up and see what had happened. That moment hit me hard, but I didn't really react. I was numb, probably from the drugs. I went inside the side door he opened and climbed the stairs. She was lying on her mattress on the living room floor. Her eyes were wide open, staring blankly at the ceiling. Her skin looked normal, but something felt off. An eerie silence filled the room. We stood there a few minutes before my friend, who had been in the scene longer, started gathering her things. I asked what I should do, and he told me to clean up her place for her family, get rid of extra condoms, used needles, and other drug paraphernalia. He told me to check her for pills. I knew exactly what he meant, because she had people over who might steal from her. She kept Xanax and heroin in her bra. Since I was a woman, I felt it was less disrespectful for me to do it. Dumb logic, I know. I found her bag and her pills. Then I left. My friend stayed behind to call the police. They questioned him but didn't seem too concerned about investigating. We never talked about it after that. I almost automatically called her dealer with whatever money I had left because I figured if her drugs could kill her, his were probably top quality. And he was right. I feel messed up sharing this. I have never said it out loud before. I've been clean for 2 years now, but I still remember the look on her face and the cold softness of her chest. That was a dark chapter in my life. Thanks for listening. Caring for my father-in-law. I was married then, and we had just moved into a bigger house because my husband's father was getting worse. He had suffered several strokes. I think they're called transient ischemic attacks, small strokes. My husband was using drugs and spending time with his girlfriend, leaving me to take care of his father, our toddler daughter, and work full-time. His father was a proud man. He absolutely refused to go to a nursing home. I respected that deeply. He had been an engineer for Pratt & Whitney, worked with NASA, and even with one of the presidents. From what I heard, he did a lot of work on fuel cells. He did not want to be left to die in a nursing home, and I understood that. But I was not trained as a home health aide. I did the best I could, but he really needed skilled care. I had to change him, bathe him, move him around. The poor man lived in filth sometimes because I was working full-time and couldn't get home to care for him until after work. My husband wouldn't help, he was too broken. One night, while bathing him in the shower, he had a shower seat, he fell. One leg went straight up the side of the shower stall while the other was outside. He was over 6 feet tall and I'm only 5 feet. It was not easy getting him out, and although he had no visible injuries, elderly people don't handle falls well. After that fall, he decided he wanted to die. He became bedridden and refused to eat. I tried everything, but he was stubborn. That was how his wife had died. She had just decided to give up and lay in bed refusing food. I took time off work and got my sister to care for my toddler so I could be with him. I didn't want him to die alone. He survived about 2 or 3 weeks that way. One night I knew it was coming. I stayed by his bedside all night. Hospice was involved by then. They came to manage his pain with patches and catheters. I made sure he had the patches on and told him it was okay to let go. I needed to rest, so I went into the other room and slept in a recliner for about an hour. The stress had worn me out. When I woke up, he was gone. I cried. I didn't want him taken away until my husband came home, though he was out all night most nights. So I stayed with the body for a while. When my husband finally came back, I told him. He said his goodbyes, then went off to get drunk with his girlfriend. I called hospice and a nurse arrived. The poor old man was naked, and I knew he would never have allowed himself to leave the house that way. I insisted we get him dressed for the ambulance ride. Removing the catheter from a deceased person is horrible under any circumstance. It was nightmare fuel. With the nurse's help, I dressed him. It was one of the most surreal experiences of my life. I hope I never have to do it again. But he deserved dignity after all he'd been through, and after the terrible care I'd given him. Soon after he passed, I took my daughter and left my husband. The girl in the alley. I used to work as a security guard at the university I attended. My job was residential security, nothing too intense. Mostly, I dealt with drunk freshmen on Thursday through Saturday nights. The job was only for students and was part of the university police department. Because of that, no one expected us to handle anything serious, and we weren't really trained for it either. About a year into the job, during a regular 9 o'clock to midnight shift, a student rushed into the lobby looking shaken and scared. He told me there was a girl in the alleyway between our high-rise dorm and the next building. He said she was not moving, and when he got close, he thought she might be asleep. But there was so much blood. His voice cracked as he explained all this, clearly panicked. I told him to take me there. I grabbed my radio and told the other guards to call the police. I followed the student out to the alley. He pointed out the girl from behind the fence that separated the alley. I needed to get closer and check her vital signs because of my CPR training. I climbed over the fence. When I got near her, I could tell right away there was no need to check. She was dead. Despite the damage she had, I recognized her face. That night, I helped detectives identify her. One of them showed me a university ID found on her body. I knew her, she lived in the high-rise. After seeing so many students every day, you start to remember faces. We looked into her dorm room on the 14th floor. Her computer was still on the bed. The window was open, and the screen that usually stops things from falling out was ripped off and lying on the floor. These windows open like a small chute or mailbox, and the opening isn't very big. The moment I saw that torn screen, I knew, without anyone telling me, she had taken her own life. After that, they told me to go back downstairs. I had a mental breakdown and started crying uncontrollably. A few other students walked through the lobby joking, saying, "I heard someone died. Let's go see the body. I hope there's blood." That pushed me over the edge. I jumped over the desk, ready to confront them, but my coworker grabbed me and pulled me into the back office to calm down. By then, EMTs and the police had arrived and taken the body away. I finally went home at 5 in the morning. That night stuck with me and threw me into a deep depression for a long time. My grades suffered. I stopped eating much. I just stayed home and couldn't find a reason to go to class. I knew that girl. She came in every day, always smiling, never looking upset. And yet, there she was lying dead in that alley. It just shows how real and hidden depression can be. People need to stop thinking it's something you can just get over. Sorry for the long story. I hope it was worth reading.